welcome back to another episode of the Next Level Minds podcast. My name is Chris Chapman, and I am your host. And if this is your first time tuning in, then this is a podcast dedicated to those who want to reach a next level in their business, personal, or career life. And the way in which we do that is we speak with entrepreneurs, content creators, and movers and shakers in their industry, and we really walk through their story of how they have gotten from point A to point B and overcame various adversities along the way. So if you have not taken the time to do this, please take the time to subscribe to Next Level Minds on Apple Podcast. Take the time to send this episode to a family member, friend, or colleague if you got some value out of it. And then we also have the Next Level Minds newsletter, which is another way to get connected with folks who want to better themselves in the areas of faith, family, fitness, finances, and American freedoms. The link to subscribe to that newsletter will be in the show notes below. But on to today's guest and episode, I am sitting down with James Spearman. He is the owner of Spearman Aircraft, and he's got a super interesting story of really how he scaled his aviation business. He also has the background and expertise in that industry, as he is a pilot in the Air Force, and he's received a high military honor called the Distinguished Flying Cross. So got a super interesting story of his time in the Middle East as well, while also having to scale his business during that time. So if you're looking into business ownership, if you're wondering how to scale your business, if you're wondering how to overcome setbacks, adversities, and failures, then this episode is definitely for you. Let's go ahead and dive in to hear what James has to say today. James, thanks so much, man, for hopping on the Next Level Minds podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here. I'm a big fan of your show, and really, honestly, anyone that is out there trying to help others, try to hit that next level, is awesome, right? So, there's a lot of resiliency that goes into it, and I'm happy to get into that with you.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I think that's $1 million question that a lot of people ask is like, how can I get to that next level in the career, the business, the personal life, things like that. And I know you've kind of gone throughout various levels in your life, but before we kind of dive into all that, how's your week been so far? I know we're kind of recording about halfway through February right now. So
yeah, it's been good. It's funny in business, man. It's it's just always something, and part of what I'm dealing with now, we've had our record months for this year, and get hit with immediately we're gonna have a closure at our airfield for months and months and months, which would be a death sentence for us or something, and then it's just okay, well, just another thing we got to deal with, so figure out a way around it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of something that I've been dealing with lately. But in life and in a business, there's just always something. And you get your tolerance for stress goes up, and your resourcefulness and creativity also, I think, grows with it as well. So as long as you don't give up, right? That's the big thing. That's when you fail, is when you quit.
Yeah. And I've heard kind of the whole business ownership side is you figure out one problem for 24 hours, you have maybe a chill period, and then boom, it's on to the next problem and how you're going to solve that. So,
yeah, I mean, it's crazy because 2022, my dad, my best friend, passed away in the same year. And then 2023, it's all good, man. I appreciate it. But 2023, there was some airplane that crashed into my business. That wasn't my customer or anything. It shut us down for months. And then we had to move to a totally different location to operate. And then 2024, I was deployed with the Air Force. And I had to operate the business from thousands of miles away. And each time I just had to figure it out, me and my team, and my wife, thank God she didn't give up on me. And we just, one thing at a time, one foot in front of the other, keep going.
Yeah. Just that's the best way to put it. Brick by brick, how's a house built? One thing at a time. Same with life and business and all that. But I know you kind of referenced scaling the company and things of that nature, but I'd love if you could kind of take us back maybe to like 2015 timeframe. I know you were a military pilot in the Air Force, which thank you for your service, by the way. One of the foundations of Next Level Minds is being pro-freedom Americans. So love when we have military and veterans and people who love the country on here. But yeah, I'd love if you could just kind of take us back to that time frame, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Really, actually, I was, I started as a mechanic, enlisted in the military, and then, got my degree and, was able to position myself in a way to be selected to go to Air Force pilot training, which in and itself is very, very difficult. And so back in 2015, man, I was just a normal guy. I I was an enlisted crew chief, mechanic, working for the military. And then I was in the Air Force. I'm in the Air Force National Guard, which means you can serve and work another job on the outside. You still have deployments, stuff like that. And you'd be surprised that the amount that the military in general, most of its missions are accomplished by a lot of the Guard and Reserves. And so I was working I was deployed twice around that time, or definitely once during that time. And then, outside, I was working for a company called Cirrus, this company behind me that makes these airplanes. And I was reading every book that I possibly could, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I was trying to figure out, my dad was an entrepreneur, so I was trying to consume everything I possibly could to figure out, like, okay, I really don't like working for somebody, but I know there's a lot to learn. And so start listening to podcasts, start reading books. And then around that time is when I got selected to go to Air Force pilot training. And so I was waiting to go. And it's actually kind of funny. It leads into it. I was working for Cirrus Aircraft, and most of the customers that buy these planes, this is like $1 million airplane if you buy it brand new. And most of those customers are, very, very successful to own aircraft at that level. And I started just kind of bumping into these people walking by me. And I was like, James, you're an idiot if you don't ask this guy his story.
Yeah.
And I just kind of get their story. And one of them, I was flying with him. And, at the time, there's no internet in the plane and you don't have cell service. So you're pretty much trapped with this guy for 3 hours. I looked over, I was like, dude, tell me your story. And he told me, he was like, man, I was a normal person, actually grew up in poverty, a lot of drama. And, I went to high school and then I did the good boy thing, got a degree and became an engineer. Effing hated it, like didn't like it. And he started telling his friends, I'm going to quit my job. And everyone started making fun of him. They're like, no, you're not going to do it. And, he started looking at, okay, how do I get out of this? And he found, I think he just Googled other things to do and he saw business owner on there. He was like, I'm going to do that. And so, then he starts, there's actually like realtors for businesses. He just started hitting up all of these brokers, business brokers, and eventually found one that fit him, and he was able to afford it. And so he went from $60,000 to like $60,000 a year doing his job to like $600,000 a year within like 3 to 5 years or something. It is insane. And I sat there next to him, and I was just like, my mouth was. I was like, "You are kidding!" And I made up my mind in that moment. I was like, I had just finished like Rich Dad Poor Dad. I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to quit my job and do this. So that's what was going on around that time. And luckily, I did get selected to go to Air Force. That took up Air Force pilot training, and that in and itself was a good kind of a precursor to owning your own business, because each day you show up, dreams on the line, your friends around you are getting sent home because they're not good enough, right? So. It was very stressful 2 years, making it through all that. And then, got back and found this business. I was already an aircraft mechanic. I used to work in the shop at one point, as an employee, and I came back and made an offer to the previous owner, and we got it. And I was not rich at all. So,
Yeah. Man, that's a lot of things I want to unpack there. One, I love that you were focused like on the learning aspect. I hear a lot of people say that, and just like reiterating to the listeners that like the opportunities are out there to learn. There's books, podcasts, YouTube videos. Like now more than ever, there's good content, right? You do have to, I think, in my opinion, kind of like siphon through it, because like there's so much crap out there that just isn't good advice, but there is a lot out there. So I love that you dove into it, especially the classic Rich Dad Poor Dad. And then when you were in the Air Force, was it Pilot Academy? Is that the correct?
Yeah, Air Force pilot training.
Okay, Air Force pilot training. So you were like, okay, I want to start the business. So you were kind of like brainstorming ways to get into business ownership while you were doing that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And then you came back to the shop that you referenced that you used to work in, talked to the owner, and then essentially like bought him out and then took over it, changed it to Spearman aircraft. And obviously we'll talk about scaling and stuff, but is that kind of the correct timeline there? Okay.
Yep, that's it. And meanwhile, still had the, had to meet the minimum requirements for the Air Force National Guard as an Air Force pilot, right? So just because I'm part-time pilot doesn't mean that I still have all the full-time requirements as a pilot.
Yeah.
So, which includes deployments and trips and flying, having to keep all of that up at the same time.
For sure. So what does that conversation look like? Because I know there's a lot of baby boomers out there that are retiring. They want to exit their business. Like, I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to get into business ownership. So I'd love if you maybe could walk us through that as much as you want to share, of course.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's honestly what was going through my mind. I honestly can't remember who said it around the time, but when I bought this business, the stat was it was like 15,000 boomers a day were retiring.
Yep.
And at the time, and I assume it's still probably the truth now, 5 years later, is that, most of the wealth in the United States is still held by that generation, the boomer generation. And so this is a great opportunity if you want to purchase a business, because a boomer's probably had it for 30 years. And if it's 30 years old, it's not like all the risk of year one business, starting a business, because it already has a track record, already has systems, already has a staff in place. You're starting at the 30-year mark, not at year one, or 20-year mark or 15-year mark. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, it is a great opportunity. In fact, a lot of my customers, they're in the boomer generation. They're all looking to retire, and some of them have a great exit strategy, and a lot of them don't.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily exactly know how to sell their business. And most of them, like what I did was he owner financed the down payment, and then I financed the rest. I actually walked into this place with nothing down, which is crazy, right? Wow. So,
and then in that circumstance, do you just kind of calculate like, okay, here's the projected revenue, here's now my monthly payment with this, financing loan? Like, can you kind of walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah. So what you need to, and this is the advice that I got from flying with my friend, right? That told me to start. What you do is, if you're just starting from scratch and this is just where do I go to do this? What you would do is try to get a hold of brokers in the area. And there's like literally, I'm not affiliated in any way, but like the Zillow of businesses is bizbuysell.com. And you can go on there and just look up businesses in your area. And then you can start getting connected with the brokers in the areas. And once you start getting connected with them, just start. It doesn't really matter. All you have to do is sign an NDA, and anything that piques your interest, have them send the books over. And what you need to do is get the books and start going through them and learning what a P&L is, learning what a balance sheet is, learning all this stuff so that you can read and understand. And a lot of it, there's a lot of great books. The broker should be able to walk you through a lot of this stuff. And so there's so many concepts that you can learn so that when you do actually pull the trigger, that this is good good option. Most of the businesses sell, depending on like how much equipment they have, that would be added on, but like normally like 3 times their profit or what's left over, EBITDA, cash flow, whatever you want to call it. Whatever's left over, everything's paid that the owners is, you would sell from like 3 to 5 times that. So if it puts $100,000 into your pocket a year, you're probably going to try to buy it for 3 to 500,000, and but that business should be putting $100,000 in your pocket, right? And most normal people that make like 60 to 100,000 a year, you could probably get into something at about $1 million point without a crazy amount down. Because what they're going to do, the bank is going to do, is look at you and be like, okay, do you seem like a normal-ish person, and do you have, it's not like you need extreme credit either, but they're like, okay, he has some amount of legitimate experience that would qualify him to own a business. And that means like any sort of management experience or sales really is the most important one. But like, in mine, I was an enlisted mechanic, and I was in a leadership position there. So I had that experience to kind of prove to them. So then they're like, okay, yeah, we think he can, he's got some legitimate experience that would, make him qualified, or he'd be able to learn, right? Then they go look at the business because really they're investing in the business to see if it's going to be profitable enough so that they get paid off. So it's a little bit on you, mostly on the business.
And did you learn how to read like the P&L statements from some of the books you read, or did you outsource that to like an accountant buddy? Like, how did all that work out?
A little bit of all of it, right? You can, there's tons of books written on it. For me, it's super hard to learn how to read a P&L off of a book, but YouTube is a great option. Yep. If you've got a friend that's a bookkeeper, they can roll you through what a lot of the terms mean, and I'm rolling them out there. But like cash flow is a big one, EBITDA, profit. What are your gross revenue? Most of my employees don't know what I'm talking about when I say we grossed $1 million or $2 million, right? And then they're like, "Oh, that's what James put in his pocket." No, hell no, that's not what I put in my pocket. So
that's funny.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good options. Actually, on that website, the Biz Buy Sell website, it's got a little question mark next to each one, and you can just kind of click it, and it'll walk you through what that means.
So how did you so you got it, and you're like, all right, great, I got this. Like, how did you kind of start to scale it? What were some of the things you did there?
Luckily, I had worked in the industry before in this business, and I really enjoy airplanes. And so I knew that a shop this level should have roughly, anywhere from 6 to 10 mechanics, and should be able to put out $1 million worth of revenue, just not trying very hard. And so the previous owner, his best year was only like 125,000. So I was like pretty darn confident I could at least, probably 5x that. And that's what we did. And a lot of it wasn't just because I'm just some guru at business or anything. It's just like calling someone back after they call me, and then actually billing a customer, like just doing the normal basic things.
Yeah.
Got us pretty much to $1 million fairly quickly. And then from there, that's when you got to know how to sell and market.
Yeah. And then how did you, that's funny you mentioned that too, because like I've read, I had Entrepreneur on like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he was talking about how to find a business idea. And he was like, look at like service businesses, if that's what you want to go into, and look at the ones that have been around for a while that have 1 star. And then basically just like, don't do that 1-star review essentially. And a lot of them are like, never called me back, sent the invoice 30 days later, or like, overcharged my bank account, and like just little stuff that like shouldn't happen. So it's funny you mentioned that too. It's like, why don't we just start calling people back?
I've never heard that.
Yeah, it was genius.
That's good.
It was genius, because we were like talking about business ideas, and he had started he was probably like 60, 70. So he'd started like a bunch of companies. I was like, dude, where do you think of all these ideas? He's like, well, the recent ones were from Google and looking at 1-star reviews of industries I was thinking about, and took it from there. So
that's hilarious.
I guess that's a tip for all of us while we're listening. But So you scaled it kind of from just operating it in like a strong fashion, right? Calling people back to invoice on time, things like that. But how did you build like the culture in the organization of like, hey, I'm James taking over this shop? Because I imagine like, I don't know, maybe you bought it and everyone left and then you rehired, or like maybe people stayed and they're like, who's this dude? Like, how did you kind of go about that?
Yeah, well, the culture wise, it when I bought it, I mean, he only had a couple of 1099 people and they just kind of went away. So it
Mm.
was me and my wife in this hangar with a desk and no airplanes. And I got a list from the airfield manager, and I just started calling people one by one. I'm like, "Hey, you want an oil change?" And I did it for myself for about 3 or 4 months, and then I brought on. I actually, it was really hard to hire somebody initially. If you're just starting out by yourself, it's difficult. You kind of need a track record, and you'll have your bros that'll be like, "Oh yeah, I'll quit my job and come work with you." That's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
But actually, I was able to hire, somebody that I had experience with and known before. We were good friends, and he's been with me ever since. And so he came in and helped me. And as a technician, you're probably better at this from your sales background. But as a technician, you've got a very big mindset of where I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the thing. James comes in and fixes it at the end. And you like to micromanage and do all of that stuff. And yeah, what you do is actually, there's this guy on the internet, Dan Martell talks about this. It's like the pain curve, right? So, and it kind of peaks right when you get to about 1 million, because you have to hire people to get to 1 million, but you can pretty much micromanage everything and like do everything until you get to about 8 employees and $1 million. And then you either put yourself in the hospital or drink yourself to, or
Yeah,
whatever,
something.
or you
Yeah.
fix it. Right.
Yeah.
So, you essentially hate your business at that point. That's the pain point, is what he talks about. And I was like, damn, that guy's right. And so, the culture side of it, it's a little bit easier when you're on the shop floor every day.
Yep.
Everyone sees you. The thing that I've struggled with is once you hit the pain point, you need to realize that you actually have to start working through people, and which means you need to step back. And for me, it's been difficult trying to maintain the culture where everyone's seeing James on the shop floor every day. To no, James really needs to be working on podcasts and marketing to keep this place growing.
Yeah. Yeah, and like building like the systems out and promoting the brand, building relationships. Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, so you started this, it was in 2020 where you took this over. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So that happened, and then 2022, dad and best friend passed away. 23, you had the plane crash into the shop. It wasn't even one of your clients. It was just,
No.
yeah.
No,
And
it's
then
just some rando dude.
2024 is when you got sent back to the Air Force, correct? So
Yep.
how did you like, I guess been some crazy years. Like how did you kind of navigate some of those setbacks, especially like the mental side, right? Of like your dad and best friend passing away while also having the mental capacity to run like a new business. Like that's a lot going on in your head. Like how did you stay calm, collective, all that?
Yeah, and one of the years I brought in the wrong partner and I take responsibility for that, right? But and that made it way harder during one of those years.
Damn.
And I would say I learned from my dad early on not to quit, and I just truly believe it in my heart now. And I'm not saying like sometimes you probably should quit or something, or there's something that forces you to end or something like that. But what I've noticed is on all of my worst days, I went home and thought, well, we're effed. This is it. We're done. There's no way. I used to joke. I'm like, we're dead. Everybody's dead. That's it. It's over.
No one's eating.
I go to bed. Yeah. I go to bed. My car's going to get repoed or, something, I'm just like, that's it. We're all going to be living under a bridge, van down by the river. And I go to bed and wake up the next morning and I'm like, well, I'm still here. So, I guess I'll go to work.
Yeah.
And just and somebody says that too. There, I forget who says that, who's pretty famous about they can't stop you if you keep showing up. And I would just wake up in the morning and show up and keep going and try to figure out, okay, this isn't working, try to do something else. Or and really the truth of the matter is, all of those things made me better. It made me so much better. It made me focus on working on myself, because handling the stress during those times, I mean, I would break out in rashes on my arms. I'd throw up from the stress, stuff like that. I was just so stressed out. And the best decision I made was working with a coach, actually, during that time. And he started working with me on, hey, why don't you stop focusing on the outcome? You can't, sometimes, James, you could do everything right and you could have the worst outcome because you got unlucky, or you could do everything wrong and have a great outcome because you got lucky in that moment. And he's like, really, the only thing you can control is yourself, and just try to focus on doing the right thing in the moment. What's it going to take for you to be successful? Is it calling the customers? Okay, wake up in the morning and call customers for the first hour and a half of your day. And that's your habit pattern. If you miss it, you go roll back into it the next day. What do you need to do for your mental and your physical health? Is it take a walk or hit the gym? Okay, put that on your schedule, and that's what you do in that block. And just focus on the input. Stop worrying about that. The term is resulting, where as a verb, right? You're just only focused on the result. And so if the result's bad, we're effed, right? This sucks. This is terrible, So oftentimes you get the cards that you get, and there's so much peace in just focusing on what I can control. That's kind of like the Nick Saban thing, right? But he's famous for the process, right? Don't look at the scoreboard, which is so cheesy, and I hate that guy. But he's right. He is right.
Yeah. Though that's a good point, man. Focus on the controllable, especially during the bad times, and a lot may feel out of your control, but you can still control your habits, routines, behaviors, what you're putting into your body, your mind, all that stuff. So I love that you did that. And then would you say, like, 2024, how was that year for the business? And then what's 2025 looked like so far, 2 months in?
Yeah, 2024 was pretty tough, especially in the get-go. I was just kind of recovering from a failed partnership that put a lot of financial strain on the business. And then right after that, here we go. I get to go to the Middle East for 60 days away from my business. And and I have to figure out how to, at the time I had like 8 or 10 employees. And I had to figure out how to not let go of any of them and keep the business going. And I'm the only one that sells stuff. So it was, in a way, it was beneficial to force me to work through people. All of a sudden, I can't pick up a wrench and fix stuff anymore. I can't physically go to the customer. I can give them a call, but I can't fix everything anymore. And so it forced me to work through people. And then trying to balance that with doing combat missions out of the Middle East is tough, right? Trying to maintain the mental, you're in my airplane in the Air Force, we've got a crew of 3, and they depend on me to do my job so that we can go execute our mission and come back alive. And if I make a mistake and I show up and I'm not ready to fit for the fight, their wives and their families are, it's my fault. And so trying to show up and be mentally present and shut my phone off and stop thinking about payroll and just go execute for myself and for the team. And, America, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
So, and it was pretty cool. One mission we actually flew during the night that Iran launched at Israel in April. And the first time that they had ever launched directly, and I was a part of that, thwarting that attack, and I was awarded the nation's 4th highest award, the Distinguished Flying Cross, which was really special, and at least, kind of a good job, a pat on the back, for having to put up with all the, trying to do both things at the same time, but it was truly an honor.
Yeah, dude, that's crazy. And you said you were over there for what, about 60 days?
Yeah, I was removed from my business for 60 days. And
Yeah.
when we would get done with our, 8-hour combat mission, everyone else is hitting the bar or, on Zoom with their family, and I'm calling customers, getting
Yeah.
credit cards,
Yeah.
right? So,
They're like, why are you calling at like 2 a.m.? You're like, well, it's good.
well,
Yeah.
so
What was the time difference actually?
the
Because
time
you're
difference
in,
was like almost opposite. So by the time, and we were on the night shift, so it worked out where it was kind of like whenever we would land, it was about 9 a.m.
oh,
Something like
nice.
that.
Nice.
So
Okay.
I got lucky in that moment.
Yeah. But everybody else, like, all right, let's go chill, relax, go to sleep, go to the bars. And you're like, I got a business to run. Like, catch you guys later.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So then you got back when, like, later part of 24, or what was that like?
Yeah, it was like Mayish time
Yeah.
frame.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So for 2025, like what do you have planned that you're just excited to share about? I mean, it seems like you've been able to scale it pretty significantly over the last 4 years. I'm sure you got some good plans for 25 and beyond. So
Yeah, man. The neat thing that we were able to do was we paid off a lot of debt once I got back and just kept our head down and focused. But we were able to add a lot of dealerships, right? So we're now a Garmin dealership. Garmin makes a lot of great avionics for airplanes, all the instruments and stuff. We got that in 2025, which was awesome. It's a game changer for us. We became a service center for this light. Turboprop airplane, which is essentially a jet engine that turns a propeller. It's called Epic is the aircraft manufacturer name, and it is Epic. It's awesome. And so we became a service center for them, and just all of a sudden our opportunities started growing, more and more, and our capabilities of what we're able to do. So, we've got some challenges facing us coming up here in 2025, but yeah, I'm super excited because we're at that point where, so as a business, you run into the $1 million mark, and you can do that pretty much only word of mouth. From there, you're going to stall out if you don't learn how to market at all, right? Like
yeah,
if you don't market at all, your word of mouth can only take you here. What helps word of mouth? More mouths, right? So once you start learning how to market, and so what I had to learn because I didn't know how to do was set up a pipeline, right? Setting up any sort of CRM or process to get back with customers and figure out where they are in the deal stage and all the stuff that you probably are just excellent, right? Like this is your
yeah,
second language. I had no clue. And I was like, I'm just going to go hire a sales guy and he'll fix all that for me. No, that's
yeah.
so.
And are y'all mainly serving people like in the Southeast, Tennessee? Like, where does that look like for you?
No, honestly, we have people that obviously these planes could fly, you
Yeah,
know, across states. I mean, we've got customers as far as Pennsylvania, Miami, as far west as Wyoming, South Dakota, Dallas, Texas, So it's pretty much like all of central to east United States.
yeah. Okay, cool. And then hopefully just continuing to expand that beyond, right?
Yep.
Yeah. When you were first going back, actually, real quick, when you first started talking to customers, like 2020, what was kind of your like value prop or way to just kind of get them into the door? Because like I'm sure like the shop people knew it, but like it seems like you've grown your customer base a lot too. So
Yeah, definitely. I had zero process. I've naturally been just kind of good with people. Like I'm
yeah,
just a people person. And that got me for the most part for a while, but I had zero process whatsoever. Sales, no, none of the questions. I said yes to all, right? And I learned a lot. So from there, I started learning, how to say no, and
mm,
then what do we actually want to do? What's our most profitable jobs? And then trying to, set up an actual script, right? That will identify, is this somebody that you actually want to work with? Because from the business, you may not realize this. I'm not saying you, but
yeah,
if you only do sales, right, you may not realize why you don't want to take on a bad customer. And oftentimes it can cost the company more money than just not having that customer at all.
yeah, and time component too. If maybe spending your time, energy, and efforts on a customer that's not gonna actually add value to the business or help you fill their needs and stuff. So,
yeah, I had no way to deal with objections either. No clue. I didn't even know objections were a thing. Like, I just thought, I was like, man, they must hate me, But then I started realizing, oh, no, these are just things. Somebody told me, they're like, James, you know what you can do? You can take Chat GPT, you type the objection in there, and you come up with a drop the mic answer for every single one of them.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, this is great.
You can prepare for these things so you can have it in your pocket ready to go. I had no clue. I went 4 years, or no, 3.5 years, something like that, without even knowing the word objection.
Because then you start to, if you have enough meetings and stuff, you realize a lot of them are very similar, or if they sound different, a lot of them are different objections that actually go back to the same one or two main things. And if you can figure out how to get past those, it's like, all right, this is just natural for me to answer like that. So, what are you mainly most excited about for 2025? And, what do you want to share with the listeners just before we start to close up and all that?
Yeah, I'd like to say 2025, like I said, the two big things for us moving forward is Garmin and Epic, which is awesome. It's going to take our business to the next level. But, what I would say to listeners, it is definitely possible to own an aircraft. And I encourage some, if you're one of those people that are driven and you're listening to this podcast, right? There's nothing cooler than learning to fly an airplane yourself. And it's definitely doable. And it's really cool. A lot of fun and very rewarding. And it's a time machine. So put a plug out there for just aviation. If you're contemplating buying that plane, go do it.
Yeah. And then when you need some repairs or maintenance, you know who to hit up, Spearman Aircraft.
Yeah, that's right.
So
I can help you.
Yeah. Awesome, brother. Well, dude, this is fun, man. This is actually a unique podcast for me. Like I've interviewed business owners before, but never like in the aviation space. So I actually personally learned a little bit more about the space, and I can tell you're passionate about it. And I like your story too, because it's very relatable. Like you're like, yeah, I got this business, like figured out the financing, didn't really have to put anything down. Like it's very attainable, of course, with a bunch of hard work and the things that we just talked about. But I think it's cool because I feel like a lot of people listening are wanting to get into the same boat you're in and some business ownership. And, you just kind of walked us through a process that was like, hey, like you don't have to have $500,000 just sitting in the bank. You don't have to have, a Harvard MBA connection. Like that, it's just possible. And you kind of walked us through how. So, dude, I really loved what you mentioned there. And thanks again for all the value you dropped.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you so much. And I just really appreciate the time.
Well, that's it, everyone. Thanks again for taking the time to tune into this week's episode of Next Level Minds. Be sure to connect with James. His information will be below in the show notes. Other than that, I hope this episode inspired you. Like I said, feel free to share this episode with a family member, friend, or colleague. Be sure to subscribe to the Next Level Minds newsletter. Other than that, I hope everyone has a fantastic week ahead.